All right, we can start now. I hope you can all hear me clearly. All right, my name is Hussein Mahadi, and I'm the moderator for today's session on artificial intelligence and technology. And our topic for today is artificial intelligence, ethics, and governance. We'll be having three mentors with us today. We can see Mr. Paul Nemitz is on the call. Ms. Gray Hasselbach is also on the call, and finally, we'll be having Mr. Gabriel Udo on the call with us. I encourage everyone to turn on their videos as we are streaming live on YouTube, and everyone can see our beautiful faces and our handsome faces. I'll quickly make a few announcements, and afterwards I'll be giving the floor to Ms. Gray and Mr. Paul Nemitz to give us an overview on the topic and a very wide introduction of the topic to all our mentees on the call. I hope we all are joining. For those that have not joined, and stay tuned as our mentors will be speaking very soon. I'll be making a few announcements. Kindly permit me to share my screen. So quickly, I'll be telling us what JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship Program is about, and also some of our objectives of the program. The program is a quarterly program for students and young professionals across Africa and around the world. The mentees are afforded the opportunities to access valuable advice, training, network, mentorship, internship, discussion forums, industry updates, and resource materials from experienced mentors. The program seeks to encourage continuous training, development, and evolution in Africa and around the world. You can watch some of our videos on YouTube and some of the social media platforms like LinkedIn and Facebook by searching for JIIPCC in capital letters. Some of the objectives of the program are also on the screen. JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship Program seeks to provide easy access to quality professional guidance, training, and resource material for students and young professionals across Africa and around the world. It also seeks to facilitate dialogue and network among experienced and less experienced practitioners and stakeholders, and to transform mentees into mentors and leaders for the next generation, and to facilitate further mentorship, internship, job placements, and scholarship for its mentees. That's what briefly what JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship Program seeks to achieve and what the program is all about. I'll be taking our mentors profile shortly. I'll start with the first mentor on the call. Mr. Paul Nemitz is an experienced lawyer and leader of public policy projects in the European Commission and in non-profit organization, led director for putting in place GDPR, negotiator of the EU-US Privacy Shield and EU Code of Conduct against hate speech and xenophobia with major tech companies. His experienced foundation chair and board member of non-profit with a focus on democracy, technology, and the law, AI law and ethics, media and remembrance, author and speaker, visiting professor at the College of Europe and fellow of Brussels University, VUB. Thank you very much for joining us today on the call, Mr. Paul Nemitz. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we look forward to gaining knowledge from your vast experience in the industry. Our second mentor for today is Ms. Gray Hasselbach. I'll also be reading her profile shortly. She is a Danish author and scholar that spent nearly 2 decades working in international contexts, researching and writing about technology, politics, power, ethics, and human rights in the digital age. Data and AI ethics is her specialty. She has a PhD in data ethics from the University of Copenhagen, and currently the key experts in AI ethics in the EU's international outreach for a human-centric approach to artificial intelligence initiative. This is a project that supports the European Commission in engaging with international partners on regulatory and ethical matters and promoting the responsible development of trustworthy AIs at global level. As key expert in AI ethics, she led the evidence and study base and supports the EU's global diplomacy on AI. At the moment, Gray is one of the EU's experts that develop and now implementing the EU-US Technology and Trade Council joint roadmap on trustworthy AI and risk assessments, e.g. with the recent published EU-US AI terminology and taxonomy. Grace served as a member of the EU high-level expert group on AI and development EU's AI ethics guidelines and contributed directly to the EU's AI strategy. She was also a member of the previous Danish government's first data ethics experts committee. Gray is also the co-founder and director of academic research of the non-profit think tank Data Ethics that she co-founded in 2015 with 3 other women. She has authored several influential books and reports, including Data Pollution and Power, White Paper for a Global Sustainable Development Agenda, Sustainable AI Lab, born 2022, Data Ethics of Power, A Human Approach in the Big Data and AI Era, Edward Elgar 2021, and Data Ethics, A New Competitive Advantage, Hasselbeck and Trambridge 2016. Our expertise has led to the invitations as a speaker at significant global policy events such as COP27, Paris Peace Forum, World Expo, etc. And in the context of key actors such as the German Marshall Fund, the World Economic Forum, the OECD, and many other, as well as national governments and European parliaments. Thank you very much for all the work you've been doing so far. Your profile is very lengthy. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here on the call, Ms. Gray Hasselbeck. And our last mentor for today, I'll quickly read through his profile so that we can get through the business of the day. Is Mr. Gabriel Udo. He's currently a PhD student in Autonomous Weapons System and International Humanitarian Law at Europa Università Fredrina Frankfurt Oder. Gabriel is a research and AI law policy and ethics. His thesis analyzes ethical and legal implementation of introducing autonomy into lethal weapon system. Previously, he won the DAA funding for his project, Intelligent Weaponry Law and Ethics, and later joined the International AI for Earth Observation Lab in Munich as a Beyond Fellow with a passion for exploring the intersection between technology and ethics law. His research spanned across a wide range of areas, including ethical, responsible uses of AI, smart city technology, digital colonialism, privacy, comparative analysis in the application of technology, autonomy in weapon system, and more. As a strong advocate of human-friendly autonomous systems, Gabriel is committed to designing technologies that prioritize the needs and well-being of humans. Additionally, he possesses an international level of proficiency in Python programming, allowing him to understand sophisticated softwares, solutions to complex problems. Thank you very much. Also, I hope he's on the call right now, Mr. Gabriel Udo. I can't see him on the call, so we hope to have him on the call very soon. I'll be giving the floor firstly to Ms. Gray Hasselbeck to give us an overview on the topic for today, AI ethics and governance. This topic. Thank you very much, Ma. The floor is yours now.
Thank you. Just a quick. So I assume I'll share this with Paul and the other speaker. No, so in terms of time.
Right.
So how are you all thinking to organize this? Just so I don't spend all the time from everyone else.
Okay. All right. We are thinking to give you 45 minutes each as mentors. Yes.
Okay. All
But
right.
you can be done before the time, or just make sure you are within the time frame. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So okay, so 45 minutes then. Okay, so then I'll probably share my screen with you, and so you have something to look at the same time. Just a minute to share, and hold on, just make sure to get this in. Okay. So let me go back to the first slide. So do you see this well?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Perfect. All right. So today we're going to talk a little bit about AI ethics, and also how it's somehow related to governance, and many times when we talk about these two topics, they seem to be intermixed. And this is, of course, because of the kind of the time and moment we're in, where you could say that AI in particular has a very is a global momentum, and ethics in particular, and the ethical implications are increasingly kind of creeping into the public view and into the public debate. Recently, of course, mostly after we saw the launch of ChatGPT, we see it in all sectors of society. All these conversations about the ethics of AI and the governance of AI. Now, so I want to talk to you a little bit about ethics, AI ethics and governance in very broad terms. And first of all, the first thing I want you to kind of think about is to think of AI ethics and governance as not just anything. It's a choice in a very global competition that we have at the moment about values in particular, and different ways of approaching technology. And of course, when we think about it in that way, think of it as a choice. We also have to think about the processes that we're building and the business strategies and how we're designing with very specific values and ethics in mind. So what does this mean in particular? Now, I want to start with introducing you to two stories from two different parts of the world about AI and data innovation. And so the first story comes from Barcelona, and Barcelona was one of the first kind of European smart cities, or at least one of the ones where for the first time we really had a really investment in creating smart technologies, in implementing data-driven technologies. So the city, for example, invested really heavily in infrastructure with an extensive Internet of Things. We had a sensor network that was collecting data about transportation, the energy, air quality, and there were around 500 kilometers of fiber optic infrastructure and an extensive Wi-Fi network, 6,000 bicycles facilitated with an app, wireless sensors implemented underneath the road. There was smart waste management and so on and so forth. And this is, of course, consists of a huge, immense network of data, including a lot of personal data, sensing and acting on a very mobile environment. And mostly this is something that a person that goes through the city, you move through the city, but you don't really see it, you don't really feel it. But it's something that, of course, all the biggest actors with an interest in data, they see very clearly. So you have commercial actors with an interest in using data to better their services. You have the state actors to make service and processes more efficient, and to, of course, control the city environment. You have all kinds of actors with an interest here. And of course, when we look at the kind of ethical implications that we talk about mostly, and even also the legal implications and the implications to our human rights, fundamental rights, for example, then the main risk here is, of course, that we have a concentration of a few interests, of the most powerful interests, that these are the only interests that are met in an infrastructure as such. But in 2015, Barcelona, they got a new mayor. They took the smart city initiative to a kind of completely new direction, wanting to create a data infrastructure that was created for the system, for the people, by the people. And today you have this idea of data as a commons, for example, opening up the municipalities' data to help cities' entrepreneurial ecosystem, for example. You have the idea of empowering citizens with giving them the ability to control how they share data in this huge amount of this system full of data analytics. So, of course, this is one very particular kind of infrastructure where you have data, you have AI capabilities that are used for good, and where it's very particular kind of design of this infrastructure. Now, the second example I wanted to give you and start this and a different story is this centralized city brain AI data system that was developed by in the Chinese tech giant Alibaba that monitors every vehicle in the city of Hangzhou in China. It does a lot of more than that. It also, of course, it's useful. It has helped reduce traffic jams by 15%. It has also done a lot of other things. The system constantly monitors, for example, video footage of traffic. It looks out for signs of collisions or accidents. And all of this of course, to alert the police if there's any accidents. And it combines data from the Transportation Bureau, from the public transportation systems, and it has a mapping app of hundreds of thousands of cameras all over the city. That, of course, automatically the system can detect and respond faster to illegal parking, for example, but of course also a lot of other things. Because, of course, the interest in the centralized data system of City Brain are very big here. They're, of course, the same as in Barcelona, but the thing that's different here is that the way that the interests are met in the system is that they're concentrated in a few power actors. For example, the City Brain doesn't have a citizen oversight or control. No one benefits of this huge amount of data generated, apart from the few power actors, which is the law enforcement, the Chinese government, Alibaba, and the implications for in particular, for example, privacy are, of course, huge. So these are two very, very different stories about how you can design and implement AI in an infrastructure. And what does this mean in terms of the choices I said, and I talked about before that you have to make in terms of ethics, is that, of course, technologies like AI, they're not just what they appear to be. They represent specific narratives, specific interests, specific cultures. And when we look at them, they're, of course, the result of very different ways of understanding the world and society. They represent different power structures, and they are very often embedded in society with very powerful influences. And this is the way I want you to think about AI today when we talk about AI ethics. These AI systems are not just new shiny technologies, they're socio-technical technologies, they're infrastructures, they're part of our worlds, part of our environments. And right now, one thing you also have to think about is that there are very different approaches to how we build AI and how we make this part of our lives and our society. We have different approaches that are competing both on a micro level between designers, but also at regional and global levels. So right now, for example, and I'll get back to that, we have this kind of competition between different interest in creating what we can call a technological momentum. And that has happened all through history when we've finally seen some technologies that are being kind of adopted broadly in society, like the internet, like the electric power systems. We have a competition playing out between different ways and different systems and different ways of building these systems, different standards, different regulatory system, different ethical viewpoints and different values being embedded. So let's think about that today also. Think about not only the values that we build, but also the power in these values, the cultural positioning in when we create systems like these. They create opportunities, they're part of our economy, they they have a very great influence on our fundamental rights, and all these stories that you see here are things that you have to consider. Now, so then getting back to the basics of what is AI ethics then? And I want to start, say a little bit about what is AI ethics, and then going into what does that mean in the context of governance and this kind of negotiation we have of different ways of building technologies, and in particular AI. Sorry, it's my email that is, I can't really take it off. No, so if we take AI ethics, what is it? We have different perspectives on this. Basically, of course, as I've said, AI ethics is a recognition of the non-neutrality of AI systems. So it is a recognition that there's values that are embedded in the design of the systems and the way they're implemented and adopted in society. But we have we can look at AI ethics from different points of view. So for example, if I'll just move this, if you take something like the machine ethics, the ethics by design perspective, the value sensitive design perspective, you're looking at the technology as something you can shape. So you can go in the data system, you can look at the how you, for example, create different mechanisms for including the person that uses the AI system, the ones that are adopting it, how we're dealing with the data. So there you look at the design of the system. And this is something where you, for example, can work with designers, the engineers of AI systems, and look for ways of building systems in specific ways. So when you have a particular system like the AI systems that are incorporated in Barcelona and in the smart city there to analyze the huge amounts of data that you have accessible there, there's, of course, as I said, I mentioned something like a system of data collection and use where the people that you use the data and collect the data from are involved in some way or other. They give their consent, for example, to share their data. There's ways of understanding how you share your data and what your data is used for example. So that's you could call an ethics by design perspective. And please be reminded here that I'm talking about ethical use of these technology, ethical design. I'm not talking about kind of compliance with law, because of course there's different things that you have to do in terms of data, for example, there also. The second perspective on that you could include into this perspective when you talk about AI ethics is, of course, to understand how these systems, AI systems, are being used by people, and how the people and the humans that become part of this AI system, either in terms of for example, if you have an automated decision-making system where these are applied in specific contexts that involve specific humans, then you think of, for example, how much knowledge the person that uses the system has, how much self-confidence, how much is left to the autonomous system, how much is left to the person that uses the system. So, for example, if you take it in a healthcare situation, there's this idea of looking at how, for example, the medical practitioner and the patient, how are they kind of considered when you have a system developed, and how is it implemented? So one thing you would look at here when you think about the ethics of care, for example, is when a doctor uses an AI system, for example, in connection with, it could be an AI system that detects a specific disease based on some symptoms of the patient, how much does this doctor or medical practitioner rely on this system? How much do they rely on their own knowledge? How much do the patient, for example, feel part of the decision making? So this is the ethical perspective where you think very much about the humans involved. The third perspective in terms of AI ethics is the idea of looking at culture and society. How is the AI system, how does it evolve? How does it emerge in specific societies, in cultures? How does it, for example, reinforce specific power dynamics in society that already exist? How does it take part of in terms of when we speak about geopolitics, all the new laws, and I'll get back to that, or the new laws, the governance frameworks that are being developed at the moment? How does it respond? How does it reflect these systems? And then the very last perspective that I wanted to include here in terms of AI ethics, which I think is something that is fundamental to all of these discussions, and that this is normally what we think about when we think about ethics, we think about philosophy, is this idea. The role that AI systems play in society. So if you look at the way that AI has been and artificial intelligence has been developed in the scientific field, it was basically always a question about humans. What does it mean to be human? Can we replicate the human mind, for example, by creating an intelligent system that, so to speak, could do the same thing as a human? And here we get to one of the biggest debates at the moment, for example, in ChatGPT, where we have the whole questioning about human skills and capabilities. Can an AI system, for example, compete with human creativity? Many people some will say yes, others like me, I will say certainly not, because the human fundamentally is something different. We have different skills. And I saw one of the questions that came from some of the mentees before was regarding can ChatGPT create original art? I think it was something like that. We can have a conversation about that afterwards, because that's a really interesting question. But those are all embedded in all of these AI ethics debates. And basically what I would say when we talk about AI ethics, then in any case that comes up that has to do, and I'll give you an example, for example, now, on ethical implications of AI, you have basically all those different perspectives. So this is an example from 2016, where we had this, it was called the first international beauty contest judged by artificial intelligence. So basically what this was an AI system, a software system that was used to analyze and basically look at pictures of 6,000 people from more than 100 countries that submitted as photos, to hope that they somehow could get some kind of transcendental judgment on beauty. Of course, this in itself is a problematic approach, but when the results came in, of course, one of the main things that this AI model did and this software did was that it, of course, judged the mainstream, the general of what was submitted. And what was submitted was, of course, pictures mainly of people with white-colored skin. And so out of the 44 winners, then nearly, of course, everyone, there was 44 winners in this contest, and nearly everyone was white. There was only a few, there was Asian, and only one had dark skin. And so, of course, this is a really good example of showing all the different angles that I expressed for you before in terms of AI ethics. It means that, of course, when you go to the design level, this AI model wasn't trained on representative data. You didn't have enough pictures that represented an entire diverse spectrum of how humans may look. Second of all, we can look at it in terms of culture and power. Of course, it was representing, again, the mainstream and the people that were accessing these contests and the ones that had the power to actually send and contribute to this. And then in the very end, we have this kind of philosophical perspective. What does it mean to be human? Can these technologies compete with human judgment, human ideas about beauty and creativity and things like this? And of course, if you start from that point of view, one of the main things you said, maybe you shouldn't even create an AI technology like this. So when we talk about AI ethics, there's all these angles. One of the first ones, I think, is probably the philosophical, and I'll get back to that again, is this idea that in many cases you will see AI systems like these that are nonsensical if you start from the point of view of the philosophical perspective. Do we even need these technologies? How does it support us in reality? Now, I want to connect this kind of conversation in terms of AI ethics, also in terms of AI governance. So why is it that recently, or not recently, some of us has been working with this in a few years, but in terms of technological history, and when we think about AI, that has been part of at least scientific studies, but also has had what we call AI winters and AI summers. It's also been used in business and so on. Why is it that we've had that since the 1950s? So why is it that we're discussing this right now? Now, this is where I think it's really interesting to use some of the theories regarding socio-technical change. And one of them is developed by a historian who's called Thomas P. Hughes, who's talking about how technological systems, they evolve generally in society. And he talks about 4 different phases. He talks about the moment of invention and development, the first phase where you have the inventors, you have the entrepreneurs, you have the key drivers for creating kind of a system in a way that they find useful. So when we look at it in terms of AI systems, you will probably see, there's been different phases, but there's always been this idea of kind of entrepreneurship. You have now, when we think about the AI history as we know it now, we had the Silicon Valley moment of move fast and break things, create whatever system that makes sense. You have things like this AI beauty contest, where it's like, now we think, does it even make any sense? But you have this moment of invention and development where the key interests are inventors and entrepreneurs. Then you get to a point of transfer, the second phase, where you start wanting to kind of transfer the technological systems from one region to another. And of course, some of the dominant agents here is again entrepreneurs, inventors, but you also start to have financiers, you have organizers and enterprises as key actors. And this is also part of maybe the Silicon Valley history, moving across regions, across the world. We've all had this kind of a great some of us has had less great trust in the big actors, the Googles, the Metas, the big suppliers of AI infrastructures all over the world. And then in the third phase, you get, and this is why I'm saying this is where we are right now, you get to the moment where you're expanding the actors that are starting to get an interest in these systems, these technological systems. Because what we see is a competition to reach a kind of consolidation in society of these very large systems, like creating what I said before, technological momentums. And that is the moment where you actually start realizing that there's some problems. You have different kinds of actors. You have still the same actors as I talked about before in the other phases, but at this moment you start seeing the critical problems, the ones that starts preventing the system from growing. And this is also the moment where you start asking questions about the role of these technologies in society. So if we look at AI, for example, we've had over the last few years, we had several moments where we had systems that kind of made us question the role of these technologies in society. So in terms of privacy implications, about automated decisions where people were made powerless, about when we think about the data, we had the huge data leaks, and generally we see a kind of a feeling of disempowerment. And of course, this is the moment where you in particular start seeing other kind of actors. You have the governance actors, you have the ethical considerations. For example, I see it from the EU point of view, where we had started having from the point of view of having the EU developed the AI strategy in 2018. We had the EU high-level group that developed the ethics guidelines. But of course, that's only in the EU. All over the world, we start seeing conversations about the ethical implications, creating ethical principles, ethical guidelines. what kind of values is it that these systems represent? How can we protect the citizens? How can we develop frameworks for incorporated fundamental rights in these AI systems, and so on and so forth. So, of course, this is also the moment when we get to this moment where we're kind of all competing for the technological momentum of big global systems like these, as AI is turning into. This is also the moment when we start having to consider and think about what kind of power is it that we are providing and creating via these socio-technical infrastructures. So we can think of them as socio-technical infrastructures of power. What kind of cultural values are we reinforcing and creating with AI? So as I said before, the different approaches to AI data, they're competing right now at a regional global level. And what this actually means is that we have these local systems that are evolving into larger, more integrated global systems. And so right now, when we talk about in global politics and geopolitics about AI and these competing different systems with laws and principles and so on and so forth, the key actors we're talking about is China, the US, Europe. So, for example, some of you might have seen that China just published a law yesterday. US has its Bill of Rights for the digital. The EU has been developing, as I said before, both strategies, but also a legal framework, and which is in trilogues at the moment. And several other components. As I'm saying, there's not only the AI Act, there's also different components that kind of will structure these different standards for AI. But so this is what we talk about the most. But what I'm thinking also now in this context where I'm talking to you and from your region is, of course, one of the things that we don't hear about is for example, the AI ecosystem that has emerged in Africa. And I think one of the things that I think that we have to consider here is that if we look at this ecosystem, there's a lot of local tech spaces. There's a lot of internationally driven technology hubs and centers. But the point is that most of these are established by Google, by Facebook, the Alibaba Group, Huawei, Amazon, Microsoft, all the big US players. And these are, of course, it's really relevant to consider this because if we look at, as I said before, this competition between different value systems and different ways of building technologies, I think it's important to remember that of course the development of AI needs to be also sensitive to the values of the African region. So there's a particular kind of viewing the cultural values, the beliefs, the ethical principles, and so on. So these are actually, when we talk about artificial intelligence ethics, then there's so many studies that are showing all of these. There's hundreds of ethical principles from all over the world. But if we look at the research from the kind of early principles that were developed, none of these guidelines actually were developed for African context. None of them were developed based on the ethical values, the cultural values of the African continent. And of course, this is strange because we have there's a rich amount, and you all know that moral traditions, ethical principles that are really worthy of being considered in global AI ethics. There's a very wonderful book that I just was starting to read now, which talks about and shows the perspective from Africa in terms of responsible AI. And they, of course, talk about how to kind of transform some of these ethical debates and these governance debates to also take into account the voices from the local context. So I just wanted to remind you of this. I'm just going to say a few words about the key global frameworks that are available at the moment, and then maybe we can have a conversation, because I think that's maybe a little bit more interesting than listening just to me. Some of the key global frameworks that's relevant to look at right now, and where I think that in general, there's also a way to somehow be involved and make sure that these are implemented in ways that are respectful for local values and ideas, is we have the OECD principles on artificial intelligence that were developed in 2019. We have the EU AI high-level expert group's ethic guidelines for trustworthy AI. And the reason why I put an arrow there is because I was part of the group developing this, and this is also becoming part of the EU AI Act. And then we have the UNESCO recommendation on ethics of artificial intelligence. I, of course, would urge you to take a look at these documents because they're very relevant. I think in terms of the EU AI high-level expert group's ethics guidelines, there's also an assessment list that is very interesting to look at in terms of how these principles should be implemented in the context of developing AI. So that's relevant. And I actually think I'm going to stop here, because I rather want to have a conversation with you, maybe with your questions. And I saw there were some really interesting questions. So I don't know how, if I stop sharing this and then.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gray, for that wonderful presentation, and also very insightful and educative introduction and overview of the topic. I'll be giving the floor to, we'll still be making the discussion on the question and answer, but I'll be giving the floor to Mr. Paul to give his own insights on the topic. After he's done, I can't see our third mentor on the call right now. And so I guess we'll just be working with our two mentors on the call. So we won't be having the third mentor, so we'll be taking the question and answer after Mr. Paul's overview on the topic. So I don't know if we still have Mr. Paul on the call.
Yeah, sure, I'm here. No problem.
All right, thank you very much, sir. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. So after Gry, who spoke as a philosopher and scientist of ethics, I will move a little bit to the law, which is of course at the core of governance issues in a democratic society. Democracy speaks through law. And I would like to show you at the outset, just very simply, the page of the Italian Data Protection Authority, where they publish their press releases. And there you can see the press releases. The second press release, ChatGPT meeting tomorrow between OpenAI and Italian SA, that's the Supervisory Authority for Data Protection, that's the Garante. And the third press release is again on artificial intelligence, stop to ChatGPT by the Italian Supervisory Authority, personal data is collected unlawfully, no age verification system in place for children. And then comes the next press release, and it's again about artificial intelligence, namely the Italian Supervisory Authority clamps down on Replica chatbot, which is toy for children. And so what I want to show you here is that there are already laws in place which are very important and which will remain very important in relation to artificial intelligence, its production and its use. And in this case, it is the data protection regulation of the European Union, the general data protection regulation of the European Union. Why is it important to artificial intelligence? Because artificial intelligence programs on the one hand are trained on personal data. And the question is the use of personal data for this training legal under data protection law? And then when they are put on the market, they collect personal data. For example, if you use ChatGPT, you have to open an account. You have to give some context like your email, your telephone number, your name. But then also when you put information into ChatGPT, for example, if you say, could you please give me a profile of Mr. Paul Nemitz? Then ChatGPT collects all the information it can find on the internet about me. So it processes my personal data and passes it on to you. But if you are, let's say, a doctor and you put in some elements from your patients and you say, please write a summary of the symptoms which can be read by the patient, so simplify the medical terminology, which some people have already been doing, then you input the personal data of your patient as a doctor. So there are many constellations in which ChatGPT, as one example of AI, there are of course many others, in its operation processes personal data. And all these different forms of use and processing of personal data have to comply with GDPR. And there are other issues here, of course, as you can see from the press release. And I invite you to go there on occasion and click on these press releases. It's about age verification system. For example, does ChatGPT and how does ChatGPT verify that it is not used by children which are minor? So these are very practical examples of how the law already today has a function in protecting people against the overreach of technology on a huge scale, on the scale of billions of people, because this is really the challenge of these technological artifacts. They scale. They can potentially scale to the whole world. And AI is now in all social platforms. It is used to analyze people on the scale of billions. It is used to create profiles. It is used to auction our personal profiles for advertising purposes and maybe other purposes of which we don't know, to make money in this way. So it is a hugely systemic technology, which is like electricity, present all around us. And that's why, like electricity and the many other artifacts of technology which are around us, cars, houses, and so on, this technology needs to be strictly regulated. Please don't forget that if you want to build a house, at least in Europe, I don't know how it is in Africa and in America, but in Europe, if you want to build a house, you need a permit. Even if it's a small house, even if it's a garage, you need a permit from the administration. Why? Not because we are here, huge bureaucracy and this and that. No, because if you build a house, your neighbor may be affected. And so the job of the law is to articulate your interests with the interests of your neighbor and the interest of the whole city or village where you are living, the city planning, the landscape planning. And the same is true when we're talking about the law on AI, namely the regulation of artificial intelligence through instruments like data protection. I would also mention here the Digital Services Act, which is also a new piece of regulation, which is now becoming of great interest to all providers of digital services, which have over 45 million clients in Europe. Again, there we find all the social platforms. I'm sure we will find ChatGPT very soon. And although that regulation doesn't mention AI as such, it of course regulates how AI can be used in the context of social networking and search. So if you are a producer of AI in areas which could fall under the Digital Services Act or under GDPR, even before the famous European AI Act, to which I'm coming now, will be enforced, you have to think about these laws already. And by the way, I believe the first principle of ethics for an engineer working today, and also for a businessman working with and on artificial intelligence and other types of digital products, must be to comply with the law. Whether in taxation, where there's a huge issue of taxing digital services, whether when it comes to copyright, where there's a huge issue, whether it comes to consumer protection interests, whether it comes to data protection interest, or for that matter, complying with the Artificial Intelligence Act once it has entered into force. And why do I mention this here? Because there are two schools of ethics in modern technology discussions. There is one school where I would put Gris and others, which are those people who have good intentions and they're saying the right thing, and I can agree with everything. And it's good to have them. But there are the others who are allies of neoliberalism, who want to make sure that there are no binding obligations on industry in order to maximize ruthless money making. And some actually also want to make sure that there are no binding obligations on states. Those are the dictatorships of this world. And I think it's important to understand that one of the key functions, and that's why I mentioned the law, which plays a role when you build a house. By the way, also when a new car is produced, every new car needs a type approval, which has to be given by an authority, which is competent to check on the technicalities of the car. So it is completely normal in the world as we know it, that the law has a hard look at technology and makes sure that, that the technology doesn't harm people in terms of physical harm, but also doesn't do harm to the society as a whole in terms of, city planning is the old example of building a house. The modern example is democracy, good functioning democracy, good functioning state, and fundamental rights of individuals. So it's important to recall this because there is, let's say, an ideological drive of some people who talk about ethics to avoid the law and to pretend everything can be done by ethics in relation to high technology, and we don't actually need the law. Or there are some people who say, not only do we not need the law, we should not make laws, because in this new cyberspace, the old principles of legitimacy, and this is what the law is about in a democratic state, the democratic process legitimizes the law, including its enforcement. All these processes of legitimacy, they don't apply in the cyberspace. This is the famous declaration of John Perry Barlow in the 1990s, the Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace, which has inspired a lot of people and which is being abused by ruthless business interests and corporates to fight against the law in the lawmaking, and once the law is in place, to use every possibility in the courts to reduce its scope and relevance. So I am one of those who say nothing is more important in this age than to make hard laws, hard-handed laws, which deal with the incredibly powerful companies which develop AI and which make not only huge money with AI, but also command a big part of our social and democratic infrastructure. We all build our political opinions based on what's happening on the internet. The algorithms on the internet are very influential in politics, and at the same time, these companies also have huge profiles on all of us. So this concentration of power, money, data about individuals, about all of us, profiles, and a grip on the public infrastructure. If you see all this together, you have a backdrop for what AI, in addition to the power concentration which is already there, could lead to if we don't frame it and put it into the context of what we have always done in democracies, namely shaping the public space and shaping how we live through law. And this importance of the law, I think one cannot underemphasize it. I think we live in an age where the issue is whether there is a primacy of technology and business models, in particular Silicon Valley business models, venture capital business models, big money business models driven by people who earn, and for making possible this earning, write huge pieces about we're building the future. It's all about technology. Nothing else is important. Mark Andreessen from the investment firm Andreessen Horowitz, for example, is one of those who regularly comes out with articles which say, we build the future. We don't need laws. We don't need this. We don't need that. It's all about building the right software. The power of these people and the structures for which they stand as compared to the power of and primacy of democracy and politics. So for me, it's important that we all work together to maintain the primacy of democracy, because if we don't do it, then we will be subject exclusively to the rule of technology, money, and markets. So with this in mind, I now move on to the slides which I have on the AI Act to give you a little bit a feel of what this will be about. And sorry, I have to fiddle a little bit. I'm not as good as Gri in moving from one slide to the next. So I stop sharing here. And then I go here. Wait. Okay, there we go. Okay, now you should see my slides on the AI Act under the heading Shaping Europe's Digital Future. And the word shaping here is already our ambition. Our ambition is, of course, to drive forward technology. Europe is in many areas the world leader in technology. If you think about, where the vaccines came from against COVID, they came from Europe. So the whole story about Europe not being sufficiently innovative is a lot of talk, but I don't think there's a lot behind it. We have no reason to walk our head low when it comes to innovative technologies, but not every continent is top and leader in all technologies. So when it comes to digital and AI, it is true that America and China have a lot to offer in terms of technological innovation, while what we have to offer is legal and democratic innovation. And why is that important? Because AI is, of course, good for citizens' business and the public interest if framed in the right way and used in the right way. But it also creates huge risks for democracy, for fundamental rights, and for consumers. And that's why we have proposed a legal framework which is now close to being adopted. We already have in the co-decision machinery of the European legislator both houses ready with their opinions. The European Parliament has its opinion ready on how it wants to frame the AI Act, and the European Parliament, of course, represents the people. It's directly elected. And the other chamber is the Council of Ministers, which represents the states, and they have also their position ready. Both documents are available with different versions of this law, and now they are negotiating with each other about the final version. I think at the end of the year or beginning of next year, the AI Act will be adopted. Why do we need this act? Because AI systems are complex and opaque. They are unpredictable. They may have a certain degree of autonomy. and they work with data, including personal data. All these are issues which need to be framed, because these characteristics create safety risks. They create fundamental rights risks, democracy risks. They create problems for enforcement of the law, legal uncertainty, mistrust, and they may also lead to a fragmentation of reactions. To be very clear, we as 27 member states in the European Union, if we wouldn't do a law for the EU as a whole, very quickly we would have in the 27 member states very different laws on this issue. So for us, this is also a case of making one law for 27 countries in Europe to ensure that we have seamless business continuing in our internal market. Now, we come to the issue of definition, and some of the things I'm showing you may represent the outcome of the negotiations, but you will not find them exactly as this in any of the two proposals, because what I'm presenting to you is still the position of the Commission. Of course, we are now working with the two co-legislators to, as an honest broker, to come to a compromise. But what is important here is that in defining what we capture, we do not go too narrow in terms of defining AI too narrowly, and thus leaving important parts of AI outside the scope of this act. But on the other hand, we also don't want to include all types of software. Let me be very honest with you. When we started this process, the head of Google, for example, wrote a lot of articles, gave a lot of interviews in the New York Times, in the Financial Times, and said, we only want sectoral legislation. So the idea of American business, and many European businessmen too, is let's constrain regulation only to specific sectors. And what do they gain from this? Well, the other parts of the economy are then not regulated. So this is always the plea: no general rules, only sectoral rules. And this is a way we did not follow. We are making a general regulation with application to all areas of AI, but which differentiates according to risk types. And this is probably the core concept of the regulation. Whether it is the right concept, we will only see in this phase of application. This concept assumes that there is a very small top of the pyramid, the red group of AI being developed and used, which is containing unacceptable risks for society, such as, for example, the social scoring in China. This will be forbidden in Europe under this regulation. Then the second group, here in orange, are the so-called high-risk programs, and they contain areas which are of great importance to fundamental rights of people and to the overarching interest of the state. For example, the judiciary, the police, education, recruitment, medical uses. And then there are two other types of groups which will be uses like bots and low-risk uses in other contexts. You know, as AI can be used in many different contexts. I'm not sure the assumption is correct that most of the usages will be minimal or low risk, given also the size of those companies which use AI, for example, in recommender systems, and the amount of people who use these recommender systems. But at least our working assumption was there will also be many AI systems in other contexts which are not sensitive to fundamental rights. And there, the degree of regulation will be less. So the degree of obligations, the depths of and breadths of obligations will depend in our regulation on the level of risk, and how this is going to be exactly articulated is subject of the negotiations now between the Council and the Parliament. So here you see that we have in the area of orange and green some basic obligations of information. Very important that people, do you still see my slides? Yeah, that people see or are being told that they are interacting with an AI, because today it is possible to completely imitate humans. As you can see from JIIPCC, when writing a message, it looks like it's a person writing to you, but also when it's coming to speech, so language to speech, speech to language, all these transitions make it possible to completely impersonate. Also in a video, you can now impersonate, and therefore we need a legal obligation for people to be informed whether they are communicating with an AI or not. Why is this so important? Well, it is first of all important in the context of anything political. In particular, when we come closer to elections, we need to know whether those who applaud the candidate A are really humans and not just all machines. That's important in a democracy. But beyond that, it is important also for our own decision making, because when we have a human talking on the other side, we assume that the basic ability of a human to speak truthfully, to take responsibility, to be a moral person is present. As we know, AI has no moral. In a human, at least, we assume, because a human is a human and because a human has human dignity, that there is a certain degree of morality. But also our own dignity is in question if we are being manipulated by a machine without knowing it and communicating with us as humans without telling us that it's actually a machine which is communicating with us. But that is something which cannot be reconciled with human dignity and human self-determination. And therefore, we will have this information obligation. Just to give you one example of the transparency obligations foreseen under the regulation. And then we move to the high risk. And we have two types of high risk devices and uses of AI. First are the uses of AI within areas which are regulated, like, for example, medical devices and complex machinery. So in any of those contexts where the public interest has already expressed itself that this is a sensitive area and therefore we regulate it heavily, namely, for example, medical devices, here the AI has to comply with the regulation in place and with the principles applied to high-risk AI. And second, we are defining a number of areas, I mentioned already some, where AI is considered high risk. In addition to those which I mentioned, you find here biometric identification and categorization of natural persons, management and operation of critical infrastructure, and access to and enjoyment of essential private services and public services and benefit. This is, of course, a very important area. You know, if benefits, social benefits of the states, or if insurance products, for example, or you know, general services of the public interest are distributed only via the use of AI, this becomes very, very important that these systems work properly and respect human fundamental rights, dignity, also consumer protection, that they basically respect all laws which a human would have to respect when carrying out such function. And that's why these programs must be considered high risk. Now, How is the compliance mechanism foreseen? Here we have still a very vibrant discussion, because the Commission proposed originally a compliance mechanism which is relying on self-certification according to the way we have done it in the past with the safety of machinery. For safety of machinery, we have had long-term experience and practice that safety of machinery, you know, like, for example, a tape recorder or your mobile phone or anything electrical, you know, it has to be safe. You should not get a stroke, electrical stroke from using the device. And the fact that something is safe is self-determined and self-certified by the producing company. And this model we have proposed also for AI, being conscious that we go beyond, let's say, the relatively simple engineering question, is something safe or not, into areas which are much closer to fundamental rights and the good functioning of democracy, because of the huge potentialities of AI to also do harm to other laws, to other legal positions than just your physical integrity. But this was a political choice. The European Parliament, in the European Parliament, many have criticized this and have said this cannot be left all to self-certification. There must be elements of third-party certification, referring to the example of the car, which you know, must be approved by an authority before the new model of the car is put on the street. And the same is true for building a house. So I mean, you know, I think this is a valid discussion. We are all learning about you know, how this should be approved and approached, and let's see where this goes. But I don't think it's of the devil, and I don't think it's something unheard of that a technological artifact, also if it's software, must be subject to an official authorization before it's put on the market. I have to say personally that it's quite ridiculous that Microsoft and OpenAI have first put out their software and made people pay for it and made a few billions. And then the head of OpenAI goes around to parliaments and says, well, regulate us, regulate us. I'm sorry to say, but the ethical way, because in America there was no legal obligation, but the ethical way, the responsible way here would have been the other way around. It would have been to say, look, we have a product here, it is risky, let's talk about regulating it, and then we put it out. Because if it's true that, as Bill Gates said, and Elon Musk said, and many others, that AI is as atomic energy, it has a lot of potential, but also huge risks, then it should have been handled in the regulatory approach also like atomic energy. Nobody would have had the idea to put an atomic energy out without prior regulation. And this is one of the learnings we are taking away, that in the age of fast-moving technology, we have to stop talking about evidence-based regulation. We have to allow ourselves to do regulation on the basis of our imagination, namely our ability to think what a technology could lead to potentially. That must inform our approach to regulation, in particular when the regulation has so potentially far-going impacts as artificial intelligence. So, what are the additional requirements for high-risk AI under the regulation? Well, I could read this out to you now, but I can also say in summary, all these obligations are obligations which a reasonable, responsible engineer would follow anyway. The use of high-quality training, validation, and testing data, establishing documentation and designing logging features to ensure traceability and auditability, ensuring a degree of transparency which is appropriate and provide users with information on how to use the system, ensure human oversight, ensure robustness, accuracy, and cybersecurity. My God, any good engineer will do this anyway. So what we're making law here is nothing which is a huge bureaucratic overhead. It is making law what in the ethics of responsible engineering is already present anyway. Now, I would say the same is true for the obligations of the operator of the system as distinguished from the developer. The operator has to establish a quality management system. It has to provide and keep up to date technical documentation and so on and so on. I'm not going to read out of this now. It's all motherhood of and apple pie of good risk engineering. You know, if you build an airplane, this is exactly what you do. So no drama. And I'm emphasizing this over and over again because many in industry and many in interested political circles are talking and have talked about this regulation as if it is outrageous. It is not outrageous, neither in terms of content, nor when you look and compare it to the history of regulation by law of technological artifacts, at least not in Europe. Absolutely not. Now, what is important here and also not outrageous is that, like in medicine and pharmaceutical products, where once you have put a pharmaceutical product on the market and it is being taken by humans, you have an obligation to follow and see how this impacts the humans. And if you see, my God, people are dying, you have to withdraw it. You have an obligation to follow the life cycle of the AI on the in operation and take the necessary steps to make sure that the system stays within the boundaries of the law and doesn't do harm. So let me say by conclusion that we are very much looking forward to this law being adopted. It is urgent. We have elections in the European Parliament next year in June. And this law, together with the Data Protection Regulation, with the Digital Service Act, and a number of other legal instruments in the area of data economy and digital technology, can be read as a first attempt of Europe to write the rule book of the digital future in such a way that democracy and fundamental rights still are being delivered to people also under conditions of far-going technicization of society. This is what all of this is about. And it was important for me to emphasize also that for producers and those people working with AI, it's very important not only to look at law which has the word AI in it, but to remember that whenever AI takes over a job of a human, the system has to comply with all the laws which would apply to the human if it would exercise this function. And that's why I started at the outset with the GDPR. I mentioned the Digital Service Act, and then I came to the AI regulation, which hopefully will be enforced from next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul, for that very deep, insightful presentation on the topic for today. It's really a lot. It's really a lot to take in from both our mentors, and I am requesting on behalf of myself and everyone on the call that our mentors share those slides with us, Mr. Paul and also Ms. Gary. Share the slides with JIIPCC mentorship email, and we'll do well to share it to our mentees on their groups. So that being said, I'll also encourage everyone to always go back on YouTube. When you search for JIIPCC on YouTube, JIIPCC, you will see a recap of the sessions. I believe it's really a lot to take in, and personally for me, I will still go back and listen to our mentors and also go through the slides and make sure I get the grasp of everything that has been discussed here today. We'll be taking our mentees presentation shortly, but before that, I encourage everyone to put on their videos. We'll be taking screenshots of our beautiful and handsome faces. Why we do this is we normally share what we learned about each session. It's like compulsory for all the mentees on the call. Share on your social media platforms so that your friends would see and be jealous that they were not on the session with us today and you've learned something new. So while you are sharing, you take you attach the pictures of everyone on the call, and we also encourage that we put on a smiling face for the camera. So let us smile for the camera while we're turning on our video. Thank you very much as you do so. Thank you. Just for a few seconds. All right. All right. We can see your beautiful and handsome faces. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay. At this junction, I'll be handing over the moderating to my co-moderator on the call, Mr. Joseph Obo. He's also the co-founder of this great initiative, JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship Program. I'll be calling on him, and immediately he joins, I believe he will be giving our mentees few minutes to quickly summarize their presentation. And afterwards, we'll also be getting corrections, comments from our both mentors on the presentation. As we all know, everyone on this call, every mentee on this call, including myself, is an AI enthusiast, students and young professionals of AI from Africa and around the world. So we are all learning, and we would like to present and see if our presentation are being corrected, and okay, that's all for what we'll be expecting for our mentors. So I'll be giving the floor to Mr. Joseph Obo. Mr. Joseph Obo, is over to you.
Yeah, Mr. Hussein, before you run off the call, thank you so much, Mr. Paul. I really enjoyed your presentation. Grai as well. I came in late for you. I'm sorry about that. I also enjoyed the bit of the presentation I was able to listen to. I just want to double check, saying, do we have two group presentations or just one group?
Okay, actually we had one initially, but I think I just saw the second group sending theirs late this morning, so we just include it. But I don't think we've sent the second group's presentation to our mentors before the call, and also their question. So they have a new question, and they also have their presentation. Right. So we have two groups, but I think we can give them 7 to 10 minutes each to just summarize. And I'll also be posting the questions, the new question and the question that we sent to our mentors earlier to the group chat. So you can just go through it from there.
All right, thank you, Hussein. So very quickly, without wasting much of our time, I would call on group one to take the next 8 minutes. It's 1:23, that's West African time. So I'm expecting that by 31 minutes or 32 minutes past 1, you should be done with your presentation. Let's see how we can make this as quick as possible. So group one, you can proceed with your presentation.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Chijioke Obioma. I'm the presenter for group one. I believe you can see my screen. Let me put it on presentation mode. Okay. So we'll be speaking briefly on AI governance or regulations. I'm presenting 2 case studies. Like the mentors have clearly stated to us today, the AI is a fast developing field area that needs governance or regulations. For those of you who don't understand what governance or regulations is basically a systems of system processes that guides the establishment of an entity and all of that. So we're going to go into the case studies quickly. First, we start with the GDR, which was developed in 2018 by the European Union. We want to believe that this was of the offshoots and from the 2016 dilemma of Facebook and analytics, Cambridge Analytics, and how their data data harvesting affected the American elections of the preceding year. It was then it dawned on many people that this was really a big deal that needs to be regulated as we move forward. So the GDPR has helped the European Union and its member states increase the privacy protection, data mapping, and also has imposed restrictions on automated decision making. When AI companies have your data, they could make some decisions like you would make, just like it happened with Facebook and Cambridge Analytics, where no one thought that they could influence people's voting patterns through some targeted advertisements, if you know what I mean, if you follow that story. The next case study we'd like to talk about is one which happened recently, where 101 of our mentors mentioned it. About 1,500 tech leaders March 2023 wrote an open letter asking for regulation. Of course, Elon Musk, also Steve Wozniak, also was part of the people who wrote asking for regulation of the AI industry. They just discovered that this development was not as accurate as it's supposed to be, not transparent, not robust, not trustworthy and loyal. And it's out of control, you know, because of so much resources being pumped into it, and the leaders are having this unusual race to the top. Sorry, okay. There's a race to the top. Everybody wants to be the leading company developing AI. So there's this race to the top, making everything to be out of control. I want to quote what the CEO of Blackbird said. Mr. Wasim said, "We are witnessing rapid advances in general AI and AGI development at a breakneck speed and little thought for the implications to society." Now, from our research, we found something very particular and interesting, which was developed in, which was written by Isaac Asimov in 1942. He was a fictional writer, but he wrote about robotics, and we believe that this could have helped be a baseline for AI development. Number one, 3 laws, simple laws. Number one, a robot should not injure or harm a human being, you know, or through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. A robot must obey the orders given to human beings. I don't know, should I turn off my video? Or is it still okay?
I think you can go ahead.
All right, so second law, a robot must obey the orders given to it by its human beings, and accept those orders that will hurt and break the law, you know, break the first law. And then the third, a robot must protect its own existence as long as. So we feel that this should have been the basis, but of course, right now, people don't even consider these laws. AIs and robotics that developed, some of them breaking these laws outrightly. So now, next slide. Okay, good. The current state of AI governance and regulations. There's no unity for laws and governance of AI. Different countries, different laws. China and Russia is said to be highly permissible. We just think that many countries, because of the race to the top, they want to be the first, most advanced and all of that. So they are more concerned on creating laws that enable for AI development than creating laws that help AI to actually help humanity. So it leads to industry self-regulation, like we see with the open letter from some of these tech giants. Then we have government initiatives. There is actually a national artificial intelligence policy and strategy in Nigeria, which was developed in 2019. So like these and many other things like the mentors have mentioned, there are a lot of government initiatives towards AI governance and regulation. Of course, public engagement. Many of us are getting more aware about AI governance, AI generally, the positives and the negatives. So we are trying to work towards governing ourselves. So possible future developments and challenges. Like I mentioned, there's serious rapid developments in AI, and it's all about who gets it faster, not who helps humanity. Recently, there is just a few hours ago, Hollywood shut down, and it's because part of the reasons is because they were asked to sign a contract where there's an AI that's going to take their image and just pay them for one session, where after which the AI will now use their image for other parts, other things. It's just, and this is why there is a protest between the actors. I mean, the actors and the writers have come together for the first time since 1960 to protest what the owners are doing. So, and there is increased security risk. There's uncertainty and complexity of future developments and challenges. Importance of ethical considerations, of course, transparency.
You can begin to round up.
Transparency and accountability, fairness and non-discrimination. And it's so important for us because we need human control for these AI systems. So in conclusion, AI governance and regulation is complex and rapidly evolving, with significant implications for society as a whole. But it's essential we define ethical and responsible guidelines for it and use engaging the public and promoting transparency and accountability for all stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I know you didn't have enough time to really dig very deep into it, but we would like to quickly move to a presentation by Group 2. So Group 2, if you are ready, kindly please proceed with your presentation. Do we have a presenter for Group 2 on the Zoom call?
Yes.
All right, proceed, please. Thank you.
Everyone. My name is Cyril Dandesin, and I'm here to discuss on AI ethics. Basically, AI, as we all know from our previous class, was more talking about the act of programming human intelligence into a machine for it to carry out certain peculiar capabilities. Now, having noted that, what then comes to our mind is what is ethics? Ethics, first of all, when it comes to anyone's mind, has to do with morals and values. It has to do with certain concepts that procures one to act in the right or proper order for the purpose of safety and order in the society. Now, having noted that, the next that comes to one's mind is, what does ethics talks about, or what is the basics about ethics? Ethics, basically looking at the fundamentals of ethics, it has to do with not being harmful, something that is not harmful, something that is beneficial, and something that has to do with safety, and order. That is basically ethics. Now, the next question is, what is AI ethics? Before one talks about AI ethics, whenever AI ethics is mentioned, the first thing that comes to our mind is data protection. And in trying to establish data protection, certain measures are actually ought to be looked at. And what are they? One has to do with data privacy, data accountability, and data transparency. And then one asks is, how can this be achieved? The first has to do with one, processing of data with transparency, collection of data with consent, and the transfer of data with consent. Now, once these three things are, or one, if one of those factors or one of these are missed out, automatically there is a breach. I repeat, once any of these are missed out, which has to do with processing of data with transparency, collection of data with consent, and the transfer of data with consent. Once any of these are out, automatically there is a breach in the AI. Now, most of the challenges we are facing in the present society in respect of AI is the fact that data are being collected without people's consent. Data are being processed without transparency and fairness. Data are being transferred without fairness and consent. And this then brings a great challenge to us. And most of these issues are tied down to the pattern of algorithm that is being concerned or connected to such AI. Now, having noted this fact, before I go into the scenarios we have for today for AI, for our AI ethics, I would also want to point out the fact that AI ethics, it's really a major challenge in our society. Looking at, for example, JIIPCC, it is the amount of data it collects, that is the basic it forms about its perception, about how it ought to act or how it ought to act in the society. For example, if someone, or would I put it, a programmer gives certain algorithms to a particular machine, it is the perception of that algorithms that's how the AI is supposed to act. For example, that is why there was this, during our discussion in our group, there was this thing that was raised up which has to do with the data that are used to create AI. That is how the capabilities of that AI is as good as. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, for example, if an AI tends to collect certain data that has the infusion of racial discrimination, gender discrimination, or other form of human biases, there is also a high chances that in its capabilities, it ought to act in that function or in that directive. So this is a basic challenge. Now, coming to the two scenarios we have today on AI ethics, one how we're talking about is deepfake AI. Now, deepfake AI is simply a form of artificial intelligence that has to do with creating fake image of events. If they have, for example, there's a picture here of a particular person. This is the original by the left, and the fake image of the person by the right. Now, over time, we see how people have used AI in creating images and causing all form of obstruction, all form of danger, particularly to the human race. And if there is no checkmate on these certain activities, on the long run, it tends to create a very huge impediment in the human society. Now, having noted this fact, deepfake program, it's simply converting an original image, giving a duplicate form of that image. And for example, now with this image, deepfake AI can actually use this form of image and create a sound on it and impersonate. It can be used for impersonation. It can be used for also other form of crimes. For example, there are also situations where we've seen on the social medias where people are actually we see a video of a particular person is saying certain things, and then on the long run, we found out that those images or those messages or information that were passed across, so the public were actually forced or they were falsified. And this is an example of what a breach of AI ethics looks like. Secondly, we also have in the aspect of inequity in face recognition of AI. Now, over time, according to the Gender Shades Project, we'll be able to understand the fact that there is a breach, or there is a breach in ethics when it comes to face recognition, and this can be seen in the aspect of racism, where we see certain aspect of during face capturing or recognition of a face, there is either a misplaced fact of someone's identity, where we see particularly, and this usually goes on in the criminal justice system, where we see a particular person is being comprehended as a result of a fake or a less performing AI function, where a suspect which ought not to be arrested is arrested based on a face recognition. And after further investigation and is carried out, we discover that the suspect is actually is innocent, would I put it that way. Now, that is one. We also have in the aspect of intellectual property infringement. Now, intellectual property infringement, this has to do with where data are collected from a particular organization without consent, without transparency, and without fairness. And this is a certain breach. Like we have the case of Getty Image against Stability AI, where Getty Image accused Stability AI in the United States for collecting certain amount of data in the respect of pictures without its permission or without paying for it. And then it automatically led to a breach of the company's copyright and the company's trademark right. Now,
you have 2 minutes more. Sorry about that. I had to just cut in. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So, to conclude, in conclusion, I have certain recommendations. My recommendations are: one, in programming of AI, certain concepts or certain, as our mentors has rightly pointed out, Mrs. Gray and Mr. Paul has rightly pointed out. Now, this has to do with: one, there should be data, collection of data, transparency and fairness. There should be collection of data with consent. There should be transfer of data with consent. And once these certain concepts are imputed in the programming of AI, I believe there will be less breach of AI ethics. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cyril. It was a good one. I know that we don't have enough time to really make presentations, but thank you for using the time very much wisely. So very quickly, before we move to Q&A, that's questions and answers, I would call on either of our mentors to address the presentations. If there are any aspects where you feel that the mentees need to do more research in, you can give them that feedback. If there's anything additional that you would like to draw out from the presentation, you can also let us know, or let the mentees know where those aspects lie. So I would open the floor to Paul. After Paul is done, then Greg can proceed with her observations and comments. Thank you.
There's a dog somewhere. No, thank you very much for the presentations. I think great work. I really have no additions. I would say, stick with the subject matter. It's very broad, it's very evolving, and it's the future. So I think you have laid a basic foundation for modern thinking in your minds, and I think it's an opportunity to move on in modernity, because these are really cutting-edge issues. So thank you very much. And I have to say goodbye to you now, because I have another meeting. Thank you very much for this great event. Goodbye.
So we can have our second mentor, right, to proceed with her comments. Sorry, there are dogs around making a lot of noise. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. We have an extra what could you say, a live participant in our meeting, no? Very alive. So thank you for your presentations. Really good work and very interesting to see the different examples and everything. So I mean, we can have conversations about legislation and you know, shared conventions, as you say, as you see both from mine. I didn't go too much into the shared kind of frameworks that are being created at the moment at a global level in my presentation. Paul got a little bit more into the different legislative frameworks, where I would certainly suggest to look more into, for example, the negotiations on the AI Act and some of the other kind of legislations that are being created in Europe in particular. I think Europe is mostly advanced in terms of creating legislative frameworks for basically AI and robotics in general. Now, I think this, like, I have two things. First, I mean, the third question I can see you say is, can AI generative work be original? I mean, there's different ways of understanding originality and authenticity. And when we think about art, for example, there's always been the idea that the kind of art has to, you know, it does it originate from the artist, the original author, or does it originate in the moment when a person perceives the art, when it gets positioned in a museum and these kind of things? So we can think of AI, for example, and even, you know, some of the generative AI that creates, for example, art or literary text. We can think of it as a kind of a technology that somehow does the same thing that art does, that it makes us question certain things about creativity and about original art. But that's all it is. Basically, it makes us question, you know, where does creativity come from? And then it doesn't do more than that. So that's what I would say about being original. Then you could say generative AI, maybe it's open AI in terms of ChatGPT. That's the artist that is original in one moment, but then what other questions can it create that are original? Because basically everything that comes from generative AI is something that has been produced by humans and then it's been put together afterwards. So the original is the human. The technology is a different thing. So you can maybe think of generative AI as one piece of art, no? Another point that I would like you to consider, and also when I look at your presentations and everything, is that think of it from your perspective and your AI ecosystem. What is it that you can contribute that is, for example, I spoke something about the kind of rich cultural environment and the moral frameworks of the different African countries, the kind of the history of where you come from, and think about how that can kind of both enrich the ecosystem. I know that a lot of the AI ecosystem in the African region is dependent, and like the rest of the world, is dependent on big US tech actors, but maybe there's ways of creating technologies that reflects more your identity and your values. And I think that's what I would suggest to maybe look more into, you know, address some of you. When you look at an ethical framework, as I said earlier, it's not neutral. It's like embedded with certain values, and the global recommendations that we have and principles that are being developed are, of course, based on kind of global negotiations. But look at them. Do they reflect the values of the communities that you are part of? And I think that's mostly my point of view on this. And I can see there's a question also, why aren't AI companies slowing down in development? I mean, that's basically how this environment works. It comes to competition and economy. And that's why it's not slowing down. And that's one of the big interests that are driving the development. And of course, I would say that that's where AI ethics has an important role to play, because that is kind of a moment where we can stop and reflect and say, you know, maybe we want to slow it down and do it in a different way, create alternative AI systems. So that's basically it from my point of view. And just I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me for this. It was very nice. And I mean, you're welcome to reach out. I mean, I'm online and happy to hear from you and anything. So just thank you.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Grai. I wouldn't know if we have any live questions. Maybe we can take 1 or 2 questions before we call it a day. Does anyone have a question that you would like our mentor to address? You can just raise up your hand if you have a question. I actually have one. The question I wanted to ask basically is, does the European Union have any transcontinental agreements for the purpose of deployment of AI tools in the EU? And if it does, are there examples of how human rights have been mainstreamed into the use of AI?
So I'm not sure, does this question address, because of course there's the EU legislations that is addressing the kind of EU market, but of course if you are a deployer of AI or developer of AI that are interested in the EU market, then of course you will have to adhere to the rules of the AI Act. Then what the EU has, and that's probably maybe interesting in terms of some of the work that I'm doing, is that it right now, the EU is in a way, you know, as I talked about, there's different positionings in this field, and the EU is positioning itself in this kind of development of trustworthy AI. So it has all the safeguards in place. It has an ethical and legal impact assessment and these things. And what the EU is doing is try to work with what they call like-minded partners, countries all over the world that somehow has the same kind of democratic values as the EU, in creating standards for, or at least working together on creating some kind of standards for developing AI in a way that is kind of for humanity and with those kind of values. So that is more, but those are terms of more in terms of when you think of it in governance, there's different forms of governance. One is the legal approach. Another thing is the kind of the standards and the diplomacy. So you understand that there's when there's different jurisdictions, of course, you cannot, the EU works together with the US on creating standards, but there's ways where the legal systems are not the same. So all you can do is to kind of try to harmonize, maybe not law, but harmonize different approaches on how you create technologies. And so, of course, the EU is also participating in a lot of the intergovernmental work that's been done in UNESCO, in OECD, the G7 Hiroshima process that would be relevant for you to look into on AI. And there's the EU and the US Technology and Trade Councils that develop a joint roadmap for the implementation of AI in terms of with a risk-based approach. So I don't know if that answers the question.
It actually does. Thank you very much. We'll take one last one. Does anyone want to have a live question? Any live question? I guess in the absence of any further questions, let me just look at the chats and see if anyone has raised any questions so that we can close. Okay. I don't think we have any questions. I just want to say a very big thank you to all the mentees for your presentations and for staying till the end. Sorry about the background dog noise. Thank you to our mentors as well. Thank you, Grai. Thank you, Paul. And thank you, everyone. I wish us a very wonderful day ahead. And please do have a very wonderful weekend. Thank you for being part of the program. If you have any questions or you want to reach out to any of the mentors, please feel very free. Ask your questions. We hope that we'll be able to have some kind of engagement where mentees can engage with mentors, maybe for the purpose of research or further research, as the case may be. Yeah, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Thank you.